Hi, my name is Shelby Woodward, and today I'm going to be talking to you all about culture in Japan. But real quick, I'm going to show you my audience. 1 second. Alrighty. Thank you for coming. Like I said, I was going to be talking to you all about culture in Japan. Japan is a very interesting culture to study if you haven't done so already. I come from a very typical American culture, so I love researching other places. I noticed that my American culture and the Japanese culture differs in some ways, and I will be informing you about both cultures in regards to masculinity versus femininity, high versus low context, and individualism versus collectivism. And if you don't know what any of that means, don't worry, I'll be explaining it to you, so pay attention. The first thing we're going to talk about is masculinity versus femininity. The Japanese culture tends to stick to the cultural history of gender roles, meaning that the men would work and make the decisions, and the women would take care of the household and children. However, gender roles are evolving, and IKEA states in Gender Roles of Men and Women in Japan that in 2018 compared to the 1950s, the number of women at work has more than doubled. Still, it is typical for the men to be in charge and the women to take care of the children. Whereas in American culture, men and women seem to share more of an equal role, even though women are still lesser than equal to men in both cultures. The next thing that we're going to talk about is high versus low context in Japan and America. So, Japan has a very high context culture, meaning that they rely mostly on nonverbal cues. This allows them to be very good listeners and show emotion by their facial expressions. With people in Japanese culture, they tend to conform and not give their full opinion, unlike Americans who come from a low context culture where they seem to rely heavily on verbal context. So Americans will tend to say what they think or feel, having no regards to what other people's opinions may be. The last topic I will talk to you about is individualism versus collectivism. Japan has been culturally known to be a collectivist culture. The textbook Understanding Human Communication by Adler states that collectivist cultures feel loyalty and obligations towards one's extended family, culture, or even the organization one works for. So with that being said, they're more likely to follow the rules and do things as a whole. On the other hand, we have Americans who are more idealistic and they only care about themselves rather than the whole. In an article by Angel Journals titled Collectivism in Japan, How It Is Impeding Japan's Growth and Future, we get the example that in 2020, when coronavirus just struck, that the Japanese culture was good with following the rules of the mask mandate, whereas in American culture, people were refusing, saying that it was their right not to do so. These are just a few examples of how both cultures differ from each other. And at this point, you should have a clearer understanding of some of the cultural differences in both Japan and America with gender roles, high versus low context, and individualism versus collectivism. Lastly, I'm going to leave you with this quote by Edward T. Hall that says, "We should never denigrate any other culture, but rather help people to understand the relationship between their own culture and the dominant culture." When you understand another culture or language, it does not mean that you have to lose your own culture. Thank you all. Have a great evening.